Hello and welcome to Out of State DMing Podcast, episode 27. I'm your host, lluksblackheart. Join us as we discuss 3.5 D&D. We will be continuing our discussion on skills, starting with one of my personal most hated skills, jump. Armor check penalty does apply, and it is a strength-based skill. One of the reasons why I dislike it is one of the skills that people think is super easy because you just jump and you automatically make this magical leap no matter what the distance. Despite the fundamental stuff they have to it, it's an entire page of the book it takes up, so there's a lot of information to go over. And a lot of people don't go over that information. They just, like I said, they just go, okay, I got a 7 on my jump check. Yay. When it's like, oh, well, you needed like a 35, so you horrifically fail the jump and something horrifically bad happens. Because there's all sorts of rules and limitations on pretty much everything for it. So it is one of the skills that unless you know for a fact you can beat DCs, don't try to jump because there's all sorts of random shenanigans with it. Mainly, the types of jumps you are attempting will dictate what you need to do before you make the jump, what the DCs are for the jump, how you do the math and stuff for them for distance and height, with a bundle of restrictions. For instance, your jump check is modified by your speed. So the faster you are, not necessarily the faster you run that turn, but the faster you actually are, the better you take. For instance, if your speed is 30, you have no modifiers, because that's a basic human maneuver. It's actually basic for a lot of things. If your speed is less than 30, you take a -6 penalty for every 10 feet less than 30, which means some of the races, like dwarves and gnomes, that only move at 20, aren't very good at jumping because they take a very big minus of 6. So if anyone says, I got this, and they're slow moving, they probably don't unless they have some sort of ace up their sleeve. On the counterpoint, if your speed, for every 10 feet of speed you have over 30, for instance, if you moved at 40, like, let's say, a human barbarian, because they get fast movement, which gives them a 40-foot movement, now gets a +4 to their jump because of it. So if you manage to get any certain spells cast on you that increase your speed, like haste can double your speed to a maximum of 30. So for a human to get it, that's a 30, which is additional +12 on all their jump checks because they move at 60 feet at that point. Or like a human barbarian with haste put on them is moving at a 70, so therefore they're getting a very, very, very hefty +16 to the jump check. So just by modifying the speed, you can rapidly modify your modifier just because you're fast, which means like monks, who progressively get faster the higher level they go, do eventually get even more and more bonuses to it. So it does actually pay off big time to just be fast. Because there is other classes out there that do stuff with speed, but barbarian and monk are the primary ones. All jump DCs given here assume that you have the running start. What is the running start? At least 20 feet. So you as a player have to be able to move 20 feet before making the jump, and that's what the DCs are based off. If you are not and if you do not get the running start, you double the DC. So a standing jump, no matter if it's a vertical or horizontal, it's standing, not running, therefore the DC is automatically doubled. When we get into the actual DCs themselves, I'll be able to further explain why getting that running jump is a big, big thing. Yeah, just as you can see here, there is the long jump, which goes into DCs for the long jump. It's a horizontal jump that may cross a gap like a chasm or a stream. So, not necessarily overly complicated. Ooh, I'm burping now. Excuse me for that. And like it says there, it's required a 20-foot running start. Without the running start, you double the DC. So if you're probably thinking like, oh, a 5-foot jump, that's not high, that's a DC 10. Well, not DC 10, DC 5. Wow, my brain does not want to work accurately today. So you do the running start, DC 5, okay, very easy. You can beat on the die roll. But if you're not doing the running start, it's a DC 10. That may not seem too big or too stressful, but you have to remember, failing does have consequences. For instance, if you don't make the jump far enough because you didn't go far enough, you don't even get the actual DC 15 reflex saving throw to foot grab the edge. Because if you make it far enough, you can end up getting the edge. But the catch-22 is if you fail by 5 or more, you're not getting anywhere near that edge because you fell too short to grab an edge. And that's at something as simple as a 5-foot gap there. It's kind of hard not to be within at least one of the two edges. But then as you go up to like 10 feet, is 10, 15, 15, 20, 20, 25, it's 25, 30 is 30. So it's pretty simple. The distance you're trying to make is the DC. So you don't even have to constantly do it. So if it's like, oh, it's a 2-foot gap, it's a DC 2. Or if it's, hey, it's a 100-foot gap, it's a DC 100. Even though there is limitations that do dictate how far you can jump, also how high you can jump. That's just examples. But you also have to remember that like the DC 30, they have this there for a 30-foot jump. That's 30 foot with a running start. It's 60 without the running start. So very quickly it can be a very high DC to a I'm never going to make it DC. There is high jumps. And there's some weird things with high jumps because it does give examples there. It's not including vertical reach because we have to go below for actual vertical reach. And if you're probably wondering what it means by vertical reach, you may be able to jump X amount of high, but you can reach, because of how long your arms are, X amount of height. So if you manage to only make like jump up, like you beat the DC 20 for the 5-foot high jump, that's not high enough to get to the 8-foot ledge. But your vertical reach is 8, so that can help you out. Yeah, there's the difference of reaching a given height varies according to the size of the character or creature. The maximum vertical reach height the character can reach without jumping. Keywords: height the creature can reach without jumping for an average creature of a given size is shown below on the table below. A medium creature, a typical human, can reach 8 feet without jumping. Quadrupedal creatures such as a horse don't have the same vertical reach as a biped creature. Treat them as being one size category smaller. So if it's a quadrupedal creature, it can't reach as high as a biped because it doesn't have the arms. So right there, as a standard human, at any particular point, if a DM says, "Oh, it's about like 7 feet up," you have to make that jump. You can go, well, my reach as a standard human is 8 feet, so I don't need to make the jump check. It just boom, you reach it. You do have to make the climb check, so you're not getting rid of a check. You're just switching it from a climb, from a jump to a climb. If it's anything higher than that, you would have to jump to be able to actually do it. So this section here does save a lot of time, while also not saving it for other people. For instance, gnomes and halflings, being small-sized creatures, only have a vertical reach of 4 feet. So they have to jump to be able to get to get high enough to get any other given spot. There's the hop up, which is you can jump onto an object as tall as your waist, such as a table or small boulder with a DC 10 jump check. Doing so counts as 10 feet of movement. So if you have a speed of 30, you could move 20 feet after which. Then hop up on a counter. You do not need to get a running start to hop up. So the DC is not doubled if you do not get a running start. There is rules for jumping down. So it's pretty much you're intentionally jumping down to try to mitigate some of the fall damage. And the DC for jumping down is 15. You do not have to get a running start, which is good. So the DC doesn't get double or anything up because again, you're just jumping down. If you succeed, you take falling damage as if you dropped 10 feet fewer than you actually did. So if it's a 10-foot drop and you pass a DC, the DC right there, 15, you can end up easily dropping 10 feet without taking any damage. But if it's 20 feet, you pass, well, you only take the fall damage for the last 10 feet, not the first 10 feet. So you can easily reduce how much damage you take by simply just jumping down instead of falling down. Most of the time, it is a move action to do it. And it does state, if you run out of movement mid-jump, your next action, either on this turn or, if necessary, on your next turn, must be a move action to complete the jump. Which does imply that if you don't have enough movement, you can technically be paused in mid-air for an entire turn. Because you have to remember, technically speaking, everything's supposed to happen simultaneously, and it's within a 6-second time period. There are several specials. Halflings are really good at jumping. They get a +2. Acrobatics feat gives you a +2. If you have the run feat, any jumps you make with a running start, which is a lot of them, you get additional +4 if you do the running start, which is really great. If you have 5 or more ranks in tumble, you get additional +2 on jump checks, and if you have 5 or more ranks in jump, you get a +2 on tumble checks. So those two skills can feed into yourselves. So if you're thinking, I'm too low of level to have a ridiculous jump, make sure you get 5 ranks in tumble, and immediately you get another +2 right there. So before I get any more examples of things, I would like to point out that obviously there are several ways to just naturally increase how good you are at jumping. because there's synergy bonuses, a feat. If you're a halfling, that does it. If you do anything that makes you move faster. So it's multiple options to get your jump up. And if at any particular point you end up getting any of the magical items that augment jumping, take it. Especially if you've had to make jumps in the campaign at any given point, you're going to want to make sure you want to jump it. My favorite magical item that helps with jump checks is somewhat hilarious because it helps in two ways. The first way is it gives you an automatic +5 to jump checks just from the item. Secondly, it increases your base land speed by 10 because it's a boots of springing and striding. So by the fact that it gives you a +5 just from its magical bonus, and then you get a +10 to your movement speed, that +10 gives you another bonus of +4. Or if you're small size, it gets rid of the -6. So if you're a halfling who's already getting a +2 because you're halfling, but because of your slow speed, you're like, okay, I have a -6 because I don't run fast. Taking the boots gets rid of that -6. And like I said with other skills, any positive bonus is a good bonus. So removing a 6-point penalty by simply just wearing boots is a huge bonus because, again, that's a -6 you're not taking. On top of the fact that, let's say you're a halfling monk and you're high enough level to have a +20 to your land speed. Mix that with the boots, you have a 50 land speed, so you have a +8 just from that. +5 from the boots themselves, which is a +13. So by simply just being a high enough level monk, and with the boots, you have a huge bonus. Which is again 8 from the movement, 5 from the boots. So right there, 13. If you take into the fact that you most likely have acrobatics and you're a halfling, it's a 17, not counting strength or ranks, which 17 is fabulous, especially for a check that you don't ever want to fail by 5 or more, or really fail in general. Some of the rules for distance, because there is slight caps on exactly how far or how high you can jump. For instance, I actually want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Because sometimes they don't like to actually put everything exactly right there where you need to see them. Because I don't want you guys to have misinformed information. And my phone's making noise. It does go covering some of the whole, the DC is equal to 4 times the distance to be cleared. For example, a high jump to land on top a 3-foot height is a 12. So like just right there, it's trying to do simple math. You may not seem like jumping 3 feet is hard, because it's only 3 feet. My only thing is measure something 3 feet high that you can safely jump on, and then try to jump on it. That's the only real thing I say, so you can get an idea of why they're so very heavy on the rules. But also, it's a DC 12. Can you beat it on the die roll? Yes. Is it easier if you have a bunch of modifiers? Yes, without a doubt. Is this so? I have a cheat sheet for a multitude of things that I'm gonna have to get out because one of the things that sometimes the book doesn't like to do is give you the exact stuff for a lot of these skills or random things that an individual would need. That there is height restrictions, and it's not actually going into the depth here on exactly how high you can actually jump or how far you can actually jump. But I have a cheat sheet for this specific reason, because it also means I don't have to go digging in the book to find it or anything. The Just give me one moment. The maximum distance a character can jump for a long jump, if it's a running long jump, it's their height times 6. So a 3-foot character can jump no more than 18 feet, but a character, let's say, is like 6 feet, he can jump significantly farther than that. A standing jump is height times 2. So if you're just standing there and then you leap, like if you're on a ledge but you have to leap somewhere, if you're like again a 6-foot tall character, you maximum of 12 feet, which means no matter how good your jump is, like you can have like a plus 15, I mean not 15, a plus 50, which is really really good, like superb. If your maximum is 12 feet, it doesn't matter if you can beat a DC for a higher distance, you're stuck at that 12 feet. High jumps, if it's a standing high jump, which is a high DC by the way, like a high DC, it's your height is the highest point you can jump. So 6 feet is you can jump 6 feet, which I would like to somewhat remind people, and this is what some people don't fully get. If you're trying to jump 6 feet, there's 2 ways to look at it. And there's the I'm trying to get to the edge thing, and then there's the actual clearing the distance. There's when you jump, it's the distance. It's technically your feet are capable of leaving the ground when you're doing your high jump. So it's not necessary I want to get like within a foot or two of the ledge so I can grab it. It's about how high you can get your feet off the ground. So if you're trying to like clear 3 feet, that's well within your standing jump if you're 6 foot. And even though the DC is high, you can only really you pretty much are counting where your feet live. So if let's say you're like you're 6 feet and the ledge, you're trying to jump up to a ledge to grab it, and it's 9 feet up. Technically, you have to be able to jump high enough to get that ledge. So you need to be able to at least clear 3 feet high to technically get your hand high enough to grab that. So that leads somewhat into the fact that some people try to go from like where your head is, but it's actually how high you actually are able to get your feet off the ground. So sometimes you don't need to beat a DC check for 9 feet because you're not trying to jump 9 feet. You're trying to jump high enough to grab that ledge. So that it makes things a lot easier and a lot simpler because you just have to make that clearance. So it can be overly simplified. All I can really say is if you're going to want to be good at jumping, be good at jumping. Especially if you're wearing big, heavy, clinky armor like fighters like to do. Like, if you have a tower shield's a minus 10 to armor check penalties, which is a huge penalty. If you have full plate, that's another -6. So just with those two pieces of armor, you have a -16. Because it's big, bulky, and awkward. So it does cause multiple problems with you trying to actually make that distance. But if a DM decides to say, hey, it's only like a DC 15, don't argue with him, because he's probably trying to mitigate tomfoolery with the skill. So if he says it's a 15, just go with the 15. Regardless of it's like of only a 5-foot gap or a 30-foot gap. If he gives it if it sounds like a reasonable DC, just go with the DC. Now, if he goes like, oh, it's a 45 for a 5-foot jump, then you know there's something in here. A, is being a dick, pardon the grammar, or he has no idea how the DCs works because he's new to the game. But you have to work with your DM and DMs. Don't use this as a means to constantly kill and or force a direction with your players, because in my personal experience as a DM and as a player, DMs who use long distance gaps, chasms, separation in structures that the party's trying to get on rooftops for, or just super long distances to try to force the players to go one direction, which may sound like a good idea because we're just going to use it to force them in that direction. It does create the problem of players deciding that it's a personal challenge and then constantly failing those checks, falling to inevitable doom. Or they go bet, and then next you know, there's no point in having those things there because they're either teleporting and or flying, because they're spells and magical items to literally circumvent jump checks. And I'm not even kidding, because I've seen it happen relatively quickly because a DM uses canyons to try to force players to go a particular direction, so that way the campaign has longer longevity, because your players aren't able to shortcut directly to where they need to go. They have to go this particular route, and it's just leading to, oh hey, we just teleport. Can I see that direction? We're teleporting there. Well, I just circumvented that chasm. Or it's like, hey, it's a broken bridge. We have to find somewhere else to cross. Wizard. We're all flying now. And voila. They circumvent it. Because those spells are there to technically let players circumvent things. But those circumvents happen a lot quicker if you're constantly forcing them. Especially if you have long distance travel, they will do anything they can to circumvent it, so they can make jump checks pointless after a while. But moving on, because I don't want to beat the dead horse, we're going to be moving on to one of the more complicated skills, mainly because people not putting anything in it and then not knowing how it works. Knowledge. It is intelligence skill that is trained only, meaning you have to have ranks in it to actually do it. If a DM's letting you make a knowledge check without having any ranks into it, don't argue with him, because that's his way of making sure at least someone in the group can actually do it. And there is multiple venues for the different type of knowledges, and in some cases the DMs may introduce new knowledges to cover new topics, but the base ones are Knowledge Arcana, which covers ancient mysteries, magic traditions, arcane symbols, cryptic phrases, constructs, dragons, and magical beasts, so it does fit a nice preview event of things. Architecture and engineering, dungeoneering, geography, history, local, nature, nobility and royalty, religion, and planes. A thing to note that some people, and this is why they don't actually read or pay attention, is some people assume that just because a creature is type A, it should be in knowledge A. For instance, aberrations. The amount of people who assume that, oh, knowledge arcana covers it. No, aberrations is covered by dungeoneering, which means if you don't have dungeoneering, you don't know anything about aberrations except for personal things, despite what you would think. Because there's some aberrations that have heavily things to do with magic, like beholders are magic gurus. They're pretty much just mobile magic wands with unlimited use. And then there's some aberrations that you can find out in jungle environments or forest environments, like out in nature. So you think like, oh, this one should be covered by knowledge nature, and this one should be arcana. Nope, it's all dungeoneering. Even if you come from a spot where there is no dungeons to speak of. It's the same thing for like oozes, dungeoneering. When it comes to knowledge nature, it's animals, fays, giants, monsters, humanoids, and plants, and vermin. So even though you might think that like giants should be dungeoneering or arcana, because people have said it's like, nope, they fall under nature. So it does make it really nifty for multiple people to have different knowledges, or one or two people that have a lot of knowledges, because at least one of them can be applied to any given situation. And there is just a bundle of different synergy bonuses, and that's one reason why it's probably really complicated, because if you have 5 points here, you get bonus here. You get 5 points here, it's here. Here it's here. Here it's here. Here it's here. A thing to note is if you're identifying a monster, the DC to identify a monster is 10 plus the hit die of the monster. So if it's a 5 hit die monster, it's a DC 15. If it's a 20 hit die monster, it's a DC 30. There may be other knowledges out there that DMs may enforce, and or a DM may decide to have certain creatures be covered by certain things. So it all depends on the DM. So if a DM permits you to do it, use a certain check on a certain thing, go ahead, go for it. But that's going to have to end it today's episode. Cutting a little short. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.